Welcome to the Bite Pod. My name is Ann Riitho, and hosting with me today is Thariq, Bite co-founder and CEO. Thariq is a leader in trade data analytics and advanced screening technologies with a career rooted in bridging regulatory technology and impactful government partnerships. As our special guest today, we have Mack West. It's great to see you again, Mack. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Mack is a trade compliance expert from Ontario, Canada, who works for GHY International. He has a deep understanding of customs and trade regulations and helps businesses navigate complexities of global trade while ensuring seamless cross-border operations. His dedication to compliance and efficiency makes him a key resource for companies looking to stay ahead in an ever-changing trade landscape. So, as always, before we move on, I want to take a moment to briefly describe the Bite platform. Bite is a screening platform designed to streamline compliance and risk management by providing access to comprehensive data sets on high-risk entities, commodities, and trade compliance regulations. Utilizing advanced AI-driven insights, Bite enhances decision-making for businesses across various industries, from manufacturing to importers and exporters and law firms. Here at Bite, we aim to turn compliance into a competitive edge, make sense of chaos, and help the world trade better. So jumping into today's discussion, again, Mack, thank you so much for being here. If you could kick us off just with a little bit of background on, how you ended up where you are and how you got involved in trade compliance.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Tariq, for having me. It's an honor to be here and speak with you. The origin story is always an awesome one. It's one of my favorite questions to ask people in trade when you first meet them to understand, how did you get into such this niche industry and where did it all start? For me, I was extremely young and just starting university as a bartender and met a leader at a well-established customs broker and was naive enough to ask him how he made all his money. And that was really this simple as the origin story was for me to get into this industry. I think day one I thought customs brokerage was on Wall Street or Bay Street in Toronto, but it's certainly far from that. It's an ever-changing complex industry that I was very fortunate to find.
That's awesome. And previously you've kind of shared a little bit about the company and what it does, and it's pretty unique. Tell us a little bit about GHY and kind of the background there.
Certainly, GHY is unique in the marketplace. Unique in the sense that not even just a customs brokerage. A lot of organizations don't make it to a fourth generation family owned model. I think if you look at the typical path, you're lucky to make it two generations or to the third generation even, and let alone four. And Rick Reese, our owner, has done an excellent job of living the legacy all the way through his great great grandfather in George H. Young. A lot of the values that we live every day at GHY are focused around being a family owned business. And you hear that a lot in business where it's like, oh, it's like a family here. And you certainly do feel it when you work at a company like GHY. I'm certainly fortunate to be in my ninth year now with GHY and seeing, the 170 people that we are across Canada and the United States really work as one. I think we've done an excellent job of staying focused. And the old adage of doing one thing really well and not trying to stretch ourselves thin across multiple supply chain services, finding the right partners to kind of complement what we do. And that's the one thing of trade compliance. Like that's trade facilitation. I guess plainly put is customs brokerage, being and making sure that, importers are compliant, that we're providing the service to make sure that shipments cross borders timely, efficiently, and correctly. And doing that one little tiny piece of a supply chain has so much impact to the broader scheme of things. But that's I guess a little bit on who we are and I guess how lucky I am to be here.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, a fourth generation company, in this day and age, still intact, as it is pretty much unheard of. So, yeah, no, it's fantastic having you on, Mac. We're excited to kind of hear from you, and yeah, and you wanna maybe pepper Mac with his kind of first question here.
Yeah, definitely. So Mac, when we were preparing for this, you had a lot of great insights and takes and kind of predictions for what 2025 might bring with the tariffs. And, we were calling it Mac's crystal ball. So we'd love you to share kind of some of those insights with our listeners.
I I think I said it last year and probably the year before. It's the single most interesting year in trade ever. And I mean, I haven't been around forever, so it's a pretty silly statement to make. But certainly, in the years that I've been doing this, this is the most interesting year in trade, and it piggybacks off what happened at the tail end of last year. But I think every day, like since we spoke prior to prepping for this, it changes every hour. Like we could, finish this up and it's a moot point because the narratives have changed on Twitter or through media and how things are handled or at least communicated. But um, we fully expect and we're fully preparing for tariffs to be implemented on January 20th. Um, I think there's two pieces to that in seeing and looking at history and what's happened in the past with Section 301 and 232 tariffs, and a strong belief that there are some challenges within existing models of how trade flows into the United States. And that's multi-pronged across de minimis entries and formal 7501 entries that enter the United States. But there's certainly been a feeling and sentiment and reason to believe that tariffs will exist on January 20th. Um, and I like and love the crystal ball reference. I use it all the time. If I had one, um, sorry to say, I probably wouldn't be here. I don't know what the future holds. I wish I did, but a couple days ago, I spent a long time looking at the levers and mechanisms that Trump could use in order to enforce tariffs on day one, and started to break them down of okay, what is going to happen here. And it looks like there's a variety of sections in the trade acts from various years across history, but it looks like section 122 allows a stroke of a pen for 50% additional tariff to be applied to um, any country that's discriminating against U.S. commerce, which is very vague, but also operating a trade deficit. So, simply put, countries like Canada and Mexico. The latest in the news is Denmark. Lots of EU chatter in the recent days as well. Many are operating a deficit with the US when it comes to trade. So I think that's right in front of us. In order to enact and long-term sustainability of putting a 15%, we'll just call it like a blanket tariff across countries with a trade deficit, it would only stay for 150 days, at which point Congress would need to approve the extension of that. But um, strongly likely that Congress will approve based on the election results and how we believe things will play through. But there is a procedure to that process. And then secondly, which is tried, true, trusted, we've seen it, Section 301, pretty flexible tariff option. There's no set tariff or quota amount. Trump could continue to target specific countries like China, and that's all on the basis of unfair trade, which is slightly different, but it really is in the minutia of how things kind of flow and function. There are some sections that I'm less confident in that would be used, like Section 338, which is up to 50% tariffs. Um, but it really depends on how things kind of go and flow and happen as to where he goes.
Yeah, and that's super interesting. And so, Mac, what are some of the things that you guys are preparing as a brokerage, as a company supporting your customers? What are kind of some of the tools or processes or methodologies you're using to to kind of help them both comply but still remain, efficient?
Excellent question. The starting point of any duty rate or tariff is a description of goods. Description drives everything, as you're aware. And, in many cases, we're telling our clients, hey, let's start at the basics and ensure descriptions are strong enough to validate tariffs. So let's just go back and make sure, that you pass a basic customs audit with reference to tariff and your classification. That's often an easy place to look to know where you stand and how accurate things are in current state. Um, we're not alarmists. I think our communication strategy through whether if you look at the huge Canadian change under CARM and some challenges and maybe information that was thrown around and how we address the marketplace was wait, hold tight, don't get a bond, wait and understand. We're doing the same thing with tariffs in the US right now, is saying, hey, we'll meet with you. Let's forecast out what, worst case scenarios might look like initially when it was 25% tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and 60% additional on China. Okay, let's model that out together based on the trade data we have and your purchase orders into the future and figure out whether that's sustainable or not. Um, it really is from there, and I think we've been talking in this vein for a little bit of time. The writing is a little bit on the wall for China. Um, Whether you follow Congress or not, or US politics or not, the one thing through the Biden-Harris administration that had bipartisan support was a real angst or almost hatred for China. And it was a multi-pronged issue across intellectual property rights, forced labor, and trade secrets. All kinds of different things kind of played into that from a global economic standpoint. But it was obvious, and we've been communicating that for some time, that hey, you've got to be looking at your supply chain and your origins, because the writing is on the wall for China a little bit. But it does. You start with the basics, start with your database, look what you have, forecast out what might happen, and then start looking at alternatives if you haven't already. There are so many different customs programs that you could explore and try to understand, maybe sourcing and utilizing an FTZ or doing so many different things. You'd be remiss not to at least sit down, take the time to model out different scenarios.
Yeah, that's so important. Modeling, projecting, having the right data. And you touched on the product descriptions, and yeah, we know that in that vein, things like de minimis are going to be super important. Having the right descriptions for your commodities. What's your, tariffs, de minimis so tied together. What are your thoughts there, and where do you see things going?
De minimis is my favorite Latin word. Um, we've got some hats made up, and I wear it far too often, and I get made fun of whether I'm at the grocery store or whatever. And it's just it's such an interesting place and space to learn because it's so ripe for change. Like if there's ever been a big bold sign that says change is imminent, it's US de minimis. And when we talk about all of the Trump tariffs that may come into play and how all the countries kind of impact on it, I constantly go back in my mind to history under Tiftia when Obama administration raised de minimis from 200 to 800 and publicly declared, hey, it costs more money to collect the duties and tax on these shipments than what it's worth. Well, nobody could predict a pandemic around the corner and the really hockey stick growth of e-commerce that was about to blossom under those conditions. Um, but we could see that there was a growing appetite for more online sales and an evolving kind of social media presence to advertising and all kinds of different things that would lead us to believe it would happen. But I don't think anyone thought we'd be in the space we are today, where we're looking at a billion parcels coming into the United States, in many cases virtually unchecked. If you listen to CBP at their trade security summits or the new trade facilitation series, I think last year in Philly and this year in May in Louisiana, very publicly stating, hey, de minimis is the channel for fentanyl and illegal firearms entering our country. We don't have the resources. We're working on new technology to help, whether that's X-ray machines and doing things. But to Thariq, to go back to your question or comment around descriptions, descriptions drive everything for de minimis. We've seen now CBP issue, hey, stronger descriptions are required. They actually issued a list of sample descriptions of saying, hey, don't use clothing as a descriptor, use men's t-shirt or boys t-shirt. They actually had to pull that back and reissue it with even stronger descriptions because their descriptions weren't strong enough. So it's almost like it's a learning experience of, okay, but even with stronger descriptions, without an entry type, it's very difficult to make a decision. And when I say entry type, I mean the basic data to validate what's on a shipment. Manifest data won't necessarily get us there, but description data, tariff value, origin will certainly help a stronger case to understand, what's what. We've seen recently here with ACE some major implementation changes around the technology in itself and how they'll identify, split shipments that exceed value and stronger descriptions. And CBP has been pretty public on how they're not giving us the secret sauce on how they're identifying and what technology they're using to identify. But they want to get into an automated flagging environment. Description that says thing will be flagged. It will be inspected. It will go through an X-ray machine or see and have a human touch it. It's obvious. I've done a very poor job of tying this back to the beginning to where Obama in 2016 raised it together, but I'll get there now. I think what that unintended consequence was to raise it was, the volume blooming under a pandemic. And ultimately, you see Section 301, well, a trade war happened in the middle of it. And then we see direct Chinese marketplaces selling direct to US consumer, kind of beating 301 tariff, or at least removing it because it's now a de minimis entry. Insanely high air freight rates, full charters, moving of small packages, and just another kind of wave in the last couple of years of all kinds of stuff moving into the US. Had you asked me 6 months ago, I'd say, hey, the two levers to pull here are anti-dumping and forced labor. They're two very important topics to customs. They're well defined. I'm not saying I know whether those two exist, but it's difficult in many cases for a marketplace to have supply chain visibility backwards. But I mean, you're probably smarter in that space than me. But this is just, kind of putting two things together and saying, hey, like there was water leaking in through the roof, so we patched it, but now it's leaking in another spot. So I don't
Yeah.
know. It's a really, really challenging time. I don't know necessarily what the answer is, other than more data is required for customs to make better decisions. We're going to see huge reform on de minimis, in my opinion.
Interesting. Yeah, it's kind of like, there's that old saying where it's like, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. But I feel like, well, trade compliance is almost like an oxymoron for that in a way. It's like, okay, there's, as you mentioned, forced labor, it's, de minimis now, tariffs, dumping. There's like five or six things at any time where, you've got to pay attention. And I think having, you know, subject matter experts like you and brokerages and everyone in the supply chain, I think now, and I think that's one of the things that has kind of changed as well, as was, it maybe was just the import of record that had to, pay attention compliance wise. But I think now it's getting to the point where it's like almost everyone just to move things efficiently.
Right. And to talk, I guess, about importer of record for a second, the onus is a challenging one. And we saw brokers suspended through the summer this year because of entry type 86, which would be seen as, the golden child of de minimis. It's more data, it's got participating government agency information. And the belief, and I don't have the facts on everything, and I don't know that anyone will ever make it public. But the belief was that brokers are acting as the importer of record in many cases, and there's inherent risk to that, having not knowing what's on that shipment. So um, it's a really tricky time that We as GHY are certainly in a position to help. And that's whether it's helping the import community or helping government agencies like CBP and FDA understand the data. We've had extensive meetings on both sides in helping stand up entry type 86 opportunities and ensure compliance. And frankly, we've said no to opportunity based on, our gut feel on where it stands in the world of compliance and what we know under the 21 CCF regulations of what standard we need to enact as a customs broker and acting in good faith and how we operate. But um, it'll be interesting to see. I think a word you used, I don't know if you used the word restrictiveness, but if it's either restricted, like if de minimis is restricted or if it's rescinded. I think those are two very distinct pathways, and I don't know which fork we're going to take in the road, whether there's so many bills in Congress or that I've been pushed to Congress. And a lawyer much, much smarter than me said, Mac, the only bills in Congress that have teeth are the ones that say how they're going to do it. The rest of it's political positioning. You can just ignore them altogether. And that was very helpful in trying to read through the 15 or so different bills that came through Congress or have been pushed through Congress. But I think the one I'm still most bullish on is the one that limits origin. I think that probably has the easiest path forward.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a very interesting take, from a legislative perspective. The actual methodology to execute the laws is so important. But and I've been doing most of the asking of questions here. Go
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. So Mac, a few things that, I've been thinking about as I've been listening, kind of the idea of restricted versus rescinded. Can you talk us through what happened like in the past couple of weeks in Mexico with the 321s?
Sure, it completely caught me off guard. I think December 24th in the morning, the Mexican government announced that the IMEX program, which is essentially a duty deferral program, would cease to operate in the way that it had in the past, and that there would be additional tariffs on the import of specific commodities. I think the highlight there was textiles. So if I say that in layman's terms, don't no more shipping your product to Mexico and fulfilling into the United States to take advantage of a duty-free solution. Um, we don't offer any Mexican solutions, and I am not an expert in Mexican customs brokerage. But my understanding through network and asking questions and the extensive reading I've done is that drawback is still an existing option. But drawback in Mexico doesn't operate in a similar fashion to the United States or Canada, and operates as more of a cash on balance with the Mexican government, and can be a cumbersome process to recover if it's almost like you keep a cash balance in order to, fund things through. So I'm not, as I said, an expert in it, but it's certainly the feeling right now is, yeah, Mexico has done something in the interest of helping, the trade narrative to slow down what we have heard is an inflow of fentanyl and people from both Mexico and Canada. So, in my opinion, right now the move now is on Canada, who I think a lot of people have seen that our prime minister has asked or been granted approval now to prorogue Parliament through March to assign a new Liberal leader, and effectively has promised to resign. So it's a very, very interesting time on both sides. But Mexico, I guess, is done. Canada it's still existing. I wouldn't advocate anybody to rush and ship all their plans to Canada. Say, hey, well, Canada's just the new Mexico. Well, not quite. I don't think that that would be very short-term thinking.
Yeah, thanks. Um, Also, you referenced ACE a little bit, in the technology improvements there. And I know Canada has implemented some new technology as well, CARM. Obviously, you have experience with that, and I think our listeners would benefit from hearing a little bit about the status of CARM in Canada.
The status of CARM in Canada. One of our associates, she leads our global trade services group. Was formerly with a senior auditor with CBSA. First time she told me over a glass of wine, the first time she heard the acronym CARM was in 1994. We started release zero with CARM. It feels like a lifetime ago, but I believe it was 2018 when release zero, and that was the accounts receivable ledger. That's a fancy word for a balance sheet. Um, that rolled out, and then we've slowly been seeing phases happen to what was considered an internal launch last May, and then an external go live launch this October. It has been an interesting time to be a part of it, and it's certainly a big learning experience. That the goal of CARM in the eyes of customs was to modernize legacy technology to give importers better visibility into their essentially financial data, like nothing to do with release. It's all post-entry accounting work. So a balance sheet or a ledger of your credits and debits on duties and taxes and adjustments and refunds and drawbacks. It hasn't really come out of the woodworks to see how everything's flowing in real world. We're not into a place yet where any adjustments or post-entry work is happening, but we are seeing now. So in Canada, we used to file B3s, like the US equivalent to a 7501. We're now filing CADs, the Commercial Accounting Declaration. So those CADs, very proud to say that GHY is a leader in. If you look at the amount of CADs that have been filed, we've done a ton of them, and we're certainly not the biggest player in the market. So it shows, I guess, the interest that we've had in CARM the whole time. And we just continued to, same message I was saying before. Here's what we can do today. Here's what we can contingency plan for the future. This is the reality. We have to live in it. And that's been our approach with CARM as well. There's a lot more to come with CARM. I don't know that we'll see, like, I couldn't even guess what the final product will be or how things will work. One of the biggest issues that the trade community is experiencing right now, and that I've been working on quite closely, is the non-resident importer program. It's effectively come to a halt over registration of business numbers. So in order for, if the three of us had a non-resident Canadian company, we wanted to be the importer of record into Canada, and we'd never done it before, and we're importing widgets, we apply for a business number. We, the broker, used to be able to do that on your behalf. Now you have to do it yourself, and it actually goes through Canada Revenue Agency. You get your business number back. There's a suffix on the end of the number that is your import-export account. It's an RM 000 number that gives you eligibility to import. Importers must register for CARM. Unlike ACE, that's a voluntary program. You go register for ACE if you want access to that data. In Canada, you have to register in order to import. We're not seeing anybody get permission or approval to use their new business number as a non-resident because they're not activating RM accounts. So it's, I guess, multiple government agencies, a little bit of dysfunction, learning something new, but we're in a very big holding pattern for new companies trying to import into Canada, and it's becoming a bigger issue every day. It's a bit of a rolling snowball. We're doing everything we can to help on both sides and try to provide solutions, but unfortunately there's not a whole lot, and it's a difficult position. But I think that's one of a few things that we'll start to see. Hey, maybe this wasn't thought through in the way that it should, and I don't know that I should be recommending what we should have done, but maybe it is a voluntary program instead of a mandatory program, because I don't doubt that there was need for a new system. I love access to data. I think that's super important for government and industry and importers. But at the end of the day, we can't halt trade over it. We're a nation that it's built on free and fair trade. Global Affairs Canada has been very public about that. Um, we need to help facilitate that and guide it. But hopefully, we can see some benefits on the security side of things. And I think that I probably glazed over that piece that the Auditor General in 2016 did give the Canadian or CBSA a really hard time over how much money's left on the table over duties and taxes that go uncollected. So maybe there is a silver lining at the end after all.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And we've glazed over quite a few topics that I think you can go fairly deep on. But obviously, we'd love to continue. We could probably go on for quite a while here, but you are a walking encyclopedia for trade compliance. And we truly appreciate your thoughts and insights here. It's fascinating. Well, it's really great to know that there's folks like you out there who really truly understand this stuff almost back to front. So yeah, thanks a lot for being on. And did we have anything else for Mac, and did we want to make him twirl his crystal ball a bit more on anything?
I was just going to ask you, Mac. I mean, you've said, forecasting and data. Any other advice you would have for our listeners as we get started into 2025? Just, top level, this is what you definitely need to be doing.
I think it's funny. My advice will probably be hypocritical because I'm a very impatient person, but I think right now patience is the best thing for anybody to employ. Um, there's a lot of uneasiness and uncertainty, and business is essentially halting until something's in writing. And I think I publicly said something on LinkedIn around 321 on this. Like nothing has changed with the minimus in the United States. Hold your horses on the alarmist attitudes. Yes, change is imminent. I believe the same with tariffs. Change is imminent. I believe the same with CARM in Canada and probably where Canada goes with e-commerce in the future after they figure out CARM. Like we live in a world of constant change when it comes to trade compliance. We know this. We've got to be patient to the point that we know exactly what's happened or going to happen. And until then, we can just speculate, model out different scenarios, try to plan to slowly shift things. But patience is really the only answer to um, a solution. If you rush into anything or make rash decisions, um, I mean, you called me an encyclopedia of customs. I'm only as good as the people I surround myself with, and I've been very fortunate to meet brilliant people through my career who have taught me a lot. The same goes for an importer. If you feel like you're, on an island, work on your network and start to ask others. Everybody's so willing to help, because we're essentially all in this together. This is a very trade is one of the most it's one of the most important parts of the economy, and no matter who in your organization, that they're likely willing to help you. Just you don't know it, so you may feel isolated in trade compliance because it feels like a small group or a cost center or this or that, but um, everybody's in on this. It's just a matter of being patient, understanding right now nothing has changed. I think Mr. Trump wrote a book on his strategy called The Art of the Deal. It's create, big distraction and then something else happens. So we've seen that play out over and over again. We can't be biting on headlines. We need messages from customs on factual change.
Excellent. Yeah. Be patient, talk to the right people, I guess, and yeah, don't panic. Those are great kind of bits of advice there. So yeah, I think that's it from us for now, Mac. I really appreciate your time and hope to bump into you maybe at a US conference this year if possible. And yeah, thanks again and really appreciate you being on.
No, thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Well, that wraps up another episode of the Bite Pod. We hope you enjoyed exploring all of these very important, timely topics with us today. Don't forget to check out Bite on social media. We are on LinkedIn and Mac, I hope you're ready for some LinkedIn contacts from our listeners. I'm sure they'll be reaching out. If you're interested in a demo of Byte, please feel free to reach out to us either online or on our website, bytedata.io. We do offer free trials of the app, and those are all available through our website. So thanks again to both of you for joining us today, and have a great day.